Have you ever thought about how sometimes life just takes a turn? One minute, you're living the high-paced city life, dealing with traffic, work, and everything that comes with it. The next minute, you're back in the town you grew up in, looking for some peace and quiet. That was me. Bob. 32 years old. Back in my hometown after years of living in the city. I told myself I was just here to get away from all the noise, to find some calm, right? But the calm didn't last long. I figured it would be like any other town, you know? Small, quiet. Maybe a few familiar faces. But there's something off about this place. It's the kind of town where people leave, and the ones who stay forget about the old stories, the ones no one talks about anymore. Take the church, for example. Right in the center, a beautiful old building that's been abandoned for as long as I can remember. I've passed it a million times, never giving it a second thought. It just sits there, collecting dust, as if time forgot it. I never thought about it much. Not until things started to change. One night, I'm just going through some old photos, trying to reconnect with the past or something. You know, those days when you're bored and thinking too much. My phone buzzes. I look at the screen. A message from a number I don't recognize. Do you remember what happened here? At first, I figured it was some spam or just a prank. But something about the number, something in the back of my mind, felt familiar. That number. I had seen it before. A long time ago. My old number. The one I had when I was a kid in this town. I wasn't sure if it was a prank or if I was just being paranoid. So, I text back, "Who is this?" The response was even weirder, "You don't remember me, but I remember you. I know what happened here." At that point, I'm thinking I'm being messed with. But it kept nagging at me. The church. I remember the whispers. People saying it was shut down, that the congregation left, and no one ever really went near it. Not anymore. But this message, why now? The message ended with one simple sentence: "Visit the church at midnight." At first, I thought it was just someone having fun at my expense. Maybe some old friend or someone from back in the day. But as much as I wanted to ignore it, there was this nagging feeling. I had to check it out. Not because I believed in any of that supernatural stuff, but because something felt wrong. So, I went. I got to the church just before midnight. The air was different. Have you ever walked into a place and just feel it? The heaviness? This place had that. The church loomed in front of me, silent, abandoned. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. I pushed the door open. It creaked, like it hadn't moved in ages. The smell of old wood hit me. Dust. Dampness. I pulled out my flashlight, the beam cutting through the dark, sweeping over the pews and stained glass windows. Everything was covered in a thick layer of dust, like no one had been here for years. Then, I heard it. A whisper. Barely audible, but enough to make me stop in my tracks. It felt like the walls themselves were speaking. But I didn't hear any words. Just something. My flashlight flickered. I brushed it off, telling myself it was just a battery issue. Then, I saw it. Shadows. Moving. I looked again, but there was nothing. Nothing I could explain. I had to shake it off. I checked my phone. It buzzed again. "You're closer than you think. Come inside." At that point, I wasn't sure what to think. But I couldn't turn back now. The next day, I called up my old friends. You know the ones. Ben, the skeptic, always the one to roll his eyes at anything that wasn't rooted in science. Sharon, the thrill seeker, the one who always loved the idea of adventure. And Jordan, the cautious one, the guy who didn't believe in anything weird, but he wouldn't take chances either. I told them what had happened, and at first, they laughed it off. They thought I was messing with them. But when I told them about the messages, about the church, something changed. Ben was still reluctant, but I could hear it in his voice. There was a hint of something. He agreed to join, mostly because, well, he didn't want me going alone. We met up that evening, each of us holding a flashlight. We were a group of grown adults heading to an abandoned church at midnight, like something out of a bad horror movie. We got there, and the atmosphere shifted instantly. It was colder. The kind of cold that goes right through you. It wasn't just the temperature, it was like the place was holding its breath. We stepped inside, and that's when it hit. The silence. It was too still. Too quiet. As we wandered through, each of us explored different sections, flashlight beams slicing through the dark. We found old objects, old rituals that looked like they had been abandoned in a hurry. But it wasn't the things we found that were the most unsettling. It was the markings. Symbols on the floor, some of them familiar, but none of us could figure them out. And then, Sharon found it. A notebook. Old and tattered, hidden earth one of the pews. She opened it, her flashlight illuminating the pages. The notes were cryptic, filled with weird symbols and phrases about the church's past. Something about rituals. Something about things better left untouched. I couldn't shake the feeling that we had crossed a line. A line I couldn't see, but could feel deep inside. You know that feeling? That one where everything feels wrong, but you can't put your finger on exactly why. It's like when you're walking through a dark room and your brain tells you to stop, to turn around, but your feet just keep moving. That's what it felt like when we stepped further into that church. The air grew heavier, thicker. It wasn't like anything you could explain, it just was. I noticed it first, but I didn't say anything. I didn't want to sound crazy. But as we moved toward the altar area, it felt like something had changed. Like the air itself was waiting. Then came the sound. A thud. It wasn't loud at first, but it got louder, sharp and heavy, like something big had just fallen in the back room. All of us froze. We all looked at each other, not sure if we'd heard it right, but the feeling in my gut told me it wasn't normal. We tried to ignore it at first, hoping it was nothing. But it came again. Louder this time. And then, we couldn't ignore it. We had to check it out. We moved cautiously toward the back, where the sound had come from. But when we got there, the room was empty. There was nothing. No sign of what could have made that noise. But the feeling, the weight in the air, it didn't go away. It hung around us, like we were being watched. I pulled out my phone, thinking about calling someone. Anything to break the silence. But before I could do anything, my phone buzzed again. The text. You're all part of this now. You cannot leave. I stared at it. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. We were standing in the middle of an abandoned church, and this message made it feel like we were trapped, like we were already caught up in something much bigger than we realized. Ben looked at me, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. He said something about leaving, but he didn't move. No one did. We were stuck. Then, in a split second, I saw something. A shadow. A dark shape darted across the room, so fast I almost didn't catch it. But when I turned to look, there was nothing. Just the dim glow of our flashlights. But the feeling didn't leave. That shadow, it didn't belong here. That's when everything changed. Sharon started acting strange. At first, I thought she was messing around, trying to make things more intense, but that wasn't it. Her face went pale, and she started whispering to herself, mumbling words I couldn't catch. Something about her voice didn't sound like her. I watched her, wondering if I was just imagining it, but then Jordan spoke up. He was the cautious one, always the one to question things, to keep us grounded. But now, his voice cracked when he said, "Something's in here with us." We all stopped. It wasn't like him to talk like that. Sharon was still mumbling, her eyes wide and unseeing. Jordan tried to move toward the door, but it wouldn't open. We all tried it, but the door was locked. How? We hadn't locked it, and there was no sign of anyone else around. I pulled out my phone again, trying to see if I could call someone. But the signal was gone. No bars, no service. I checked again, nothing. We were cut off from the outside world. And it felt like we were stuck, trapped in that church with no way out. Then the phone buzzed again. I looked at the screen, expecting the worst. This is only the beginning. Welcome home. It didn't even make sense. But I knew one thing for sure, we weren't alone. And whatever this was, it wasn't going to let us leave. Ben was the first to break. "This is crazy," he muttered, pacing back and forth. "We need to get out of here. Now." But Bob, I couldn't move. Something about that place, something about those words on the phone, kept me from walking away. There was no explanation. No reason why. I just felt like I had to stay, like I had to figure out what was happening. I don't know what the others were thinking. Ben was pulling at the door, slamming his shoulder against it. Sharon was still whispering, her voice softer now, but it felt wrong. "Bob, man, this isn't a joke anymore," Ben said. His voice cracked. That's when I knew he wasn't messing around. I turned to look at him, but my eyes didn't focus. The room was spinning. My head was heavy. It felt like the walls were closing in. I couldn't explain it. That's when I heard it, the whisper. A soft voice, not from anyone around me, but from inside my head. It was faint, but it was clear. "You're all mine." I froze. It wasn't anyone in the room. It was something else. Something that knew we were here, knew we couldn't leave. My breath caught in my throat. The air felt like it had weight, like we were suffocating. Then it happened again. The door rattled. But not from our side. It was like something from the other side was trying to get in. The entire room seemed to tremble. Jordan shouted something, but I couldn't hear it. All I could hear was the voice. The whisper, growing louder. "You're mine." I turned to the others, my heart pounding. The panic was setting in now. But there was something else too. Something darker. "We have to get out," Ben said again, slamming his shoulder into the door. But it wouldn't budge. Sharon was still whispering. I couldn't understand her, but her eyes, they were wide, unblinking. She looked lost. Like she wasn't even here with us anymore. I don't know if she even knew what she was saying. Then another text buzzed in my pocket. I didn't want to look at it, but I couldn't stop myself. "Welcome home." We were trapped. We didn't know how, but we were. And something inside that church was waiting for us. We were running out of time. Each second felt heavier than the last. My mind was spinning, and for the first time, I couldn't keep up. What were we doing here? What had we gotten ourselves into? The air was thick, almost suffocating. And every second we spent inside that church felt like we were sinking deeper into something we couldn't get out of. I couldn't ignore it anymore. We had to figure this out, or we wouldn't get out alive. The door was still locked, the walls closing in around us. It was as if the church knew our every move. The feeling of being watched was unbearable. But we couldn't just stand there. So we decided to search. Somewhere, there had to be something, anything, that could explain all of this. We stumbled across a small room in the back of the church, hidden away like it was meant to stay forgotten. It was filled with dusty shelves, old papers scattered all over the place, and photographs that seemed to have been left behind in haste. We went through them one by one. I don't know why I thought it would make a difference, but I had to try. We all did. Then, we found it. Old newspaper clippings. Dozens of them, stacked together in a neat pile. They weren't much to look at first, just stories about the church, the town, and some of the strange events that had taken place here. But the more we read, the more everything started to make sense. The church wasn't built on just any land, it was built on land where something horrible had happened, something that no one wanted to remember. A series of disappearances. People had vanished without a trace, and no one knew why. The worst part? They were all connected to the church. Rumors about a cult-like group had surfaced, whispers of dark rituals that were held right here, in the church. The congregation, the ones who had once filled the pews, they were suspected of being involved in these disappearances. But no one ever spoke about it aloud. It was a town secret, one that no one dared to challenge. As we kept reading, my heart sank. Every person who had entered the church and disappeared had been drawn there by mysterious messages. Messages just like the ones I had received. It hit me like a slap to the face. We weren't just caught up in some freak accident. We were part of something far darker than any of us had realized. And the worst part? Those who sought answers were never meant to leave. This place, it trapped them. It held them here. It bound them to its past, to the darkness that lingered in every crack of the walls. It was a curse. A curse that never let go. We were part of it now. And no matter how hard we fought, it wasn't going to let us leave without a price. The air grew colder. It wasn't just the temperature, it was something else. Something unnatural. We knew what we had to do. We had to leave. But as soon as we made the decision to go, it felt like the church itself fought back. The walls shifted like they were closing in on us, blocking our way out. The doors wouldn't budge. The air felt thick, as if we were surrounded by something unseen, pushing against us from all sides. I pulled out my phone again. There was no signal. I was starting to feel like we were in some kind of trap, and I couldn't understand why. My hand was shaking as I checked the screen. It buzzed in my pocket, and I hesitated before I looked at the message. It read, "Your choice has come. You are now part of the curse." The words didn't just hit me, they crushed me. We were no longer in control. We were pawns in a game we didn't even know we were playing. And the thing was, there was no way out. We couldn't leave. Not now. It happened so fast. I didn't even see it coming. A shadow. A dark, swirling figure appeared in front of us, blocking the exit. It wasn't human. It was like it was made of smoke, a shadow that stretched across the room, its form shifting, constantly changing. Its voice was cold and distant, like it came from somewhere far away. "You are all part of the church now," the shadow said, its words ringing in the air. "You cannot leave." I felt it, an invisible force pushing against us, forcing us back. We couldn't move. The church was holding us in place, trapping us like it had trapped everyone before us. Ben tried to step forward, but he couldn't. Sharon was frozen, unable to speak. Jordan couldn't even look at the thing. It was like it wasn't just taking over the space. It was taking over our minds, too. I was the only one still standing, still facing it. But I didn't know what to do. How could we fight something like that? Something that wasn't even real? But it was real, and it was standing right in front of us. And then the voice spoke again, this time to me. "You have a choice." The words echoed in my mind. A choice? What choice? Sacrifice yourself, or choose one of your friends to replace you. I didn't understand. The words didn't make sense. But as soon as the shadow spoke them, I knew. I knew I had no other option. If I didn't make the choice, none of us would leave. The curse would claim us all, and we would never be able to escape. The shadow didn't wait. It didn't give me time to think. It stood there, demanding an answer. I looked at my friends. They were terrified. They were waiting for me to make the decision. They were looking to me, but I didn't know if I could do it. If I could give up everything. But the shadow didn't care. It was patient, and it was waiting. Without a word, I stepped forward. "I'll do it," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I'll sacrifice myself." As soon as the words left my mouth, I felt the change. The curse, it lifted. The air felt lighter. The church seemed to breathe again. I turned to look at my friends, and for the first time, I saw hope in their eyes. The shadow was gone. The air was no longer suffocating. The doors creaked open, and for the first time in what felt like forever, we were free. But it didn't feel like a victory. As I walked out of the church, I looked over my shoulder. The feeling didn't leave. I wasn't free. I hadn't broken the curse. And neither had they. The last message on my phone flashed on the screen as I stepped into the light. The curse is never truly broken. It will follow you forever. I looked at the screen, my heart sinking as I realized the truth. We were all still part of it. The shadow, the curse, it would never let go. No matter where we went, no matter how far we ran, it would follow us. And that was a truth we couldn't escape. One last message appeared on my phone. "You're next."